Okay. I see you. Yeah, so hopefully the people watching this can also see. There's somebody sitting directly on top of my head, which is surprisingly comfortable, and his name is Ryan, and he was here last week, if you believe me, but now hopefully
No
he's
proof.
really here. So hopefully you heard him say that. So Ryan, welcome again, and maybe people will actually get to see you this time. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a software developer by trade, but I often say me writing code is the least responsible thing I could ever do for a company. Not because I'm so bad at it, I just don't think that's the right move most of the time. It's not to code. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how much code I could not write.
That
And
to
so yeah,
me,
any excuse to hang out with you is good.
that's very sweet. And I think we're going to support your contention today. I think we're going to have a pretty frustrating time with the small amount of code that we haven't figured out how to not write, and it's gonna make the case. If there was some way to not need to do this, that would have been great. So, so what we're trying to do, and I'm going to talk it through also, just in case we think of a way that we don't need to do this. But the problem we're trying to solve today is, as before, that I want to allow my preferred content management system, which already has a number of ways to authenticate, including like an in-app database or an external provider of a couple kinds, to have another external provider that is GitHub, because I have users that I want to low frictionally allow to edit a site run with this content management system. That's what I think I want. I do think we need to do it. It's just not going very well. So that's where we are. So let me bring us into where we are. I think where we left off is here, roughly. So I'll refresh this thought for a second. But before we go any further, Ryan, how is the screen sharing for you? Is it clearer today than
I
last
can read
time?
it all. Yeah, I mean, every now and then I'll get a little bit of blurriness, but right now it's holding. So yeah.
Okay, so it's probably CPU bound on my end, but mostly not in a way that you're encountering.
Yep, seems good so far.
Okay, so for my own reference, as well as any other potential streamers out there, last week when I had Ryan and also Ted Young join me, and also earlier this week when I had Astrid Savatsky join me, none of them could see my screen as clearly and as rapidly as you can see it on the stream, which is less productive than I would want. And so I figured out it's one of two things. I changed two things. One of them is that instead of the Safari browser for the screen sharing I'm doing with my pair, I'm using a Chromie browser. I'm using Vivaldi. And that might be a little bit helpful, but probably the big difference maker, we can experiment next time, was my external display for all the off screen stuff, like Twitch and sharing my video with Ryan, had been a display link, which requires a driver that is not as simple as like putting bits on a screen. It's pretty CPU intensive. So instead of that, I'm doing an external display a different way, and it seems like it helps. So hopefully that's it. So back to where we were. We have this script. We borrowed it from the example given by this Perl module, NetOAuth2 Profile Web Server. And Ryan, there's a couple changes since you last saw this because I programmed on Monday with
Hmm.
Astrid a little bit. We did actually go and register with GitHub, a
Okay.
little app. And my little app is my little app, my little app is this GitHub auth.local. As you may
Right.
recall, we finished that up just before our last session. Now it's actually
Okay.
registered. Probably
Okay.
wrong, but it's free to re-register, I assume. So I got a client ID, I got a secret. I'm hard coding them. Once this is working, obviously, it would be a better
Yeah.
idea in a production site not to hard code them and not to show them on a stream. But worst case scenario, somebody uses this to probably solve this problem before I do. is probably the worst case scenario. I
Yeah.
don't know what else they can do with this client
They'll
secret.
locally host their
This
own
isn't a
site with that
website
host
that
name.
anybody else can access. So now we're trying to figure out what the hell, because those are the pieces of information, but it's not working that well. So let me show. Let's just run. Let's just see where we were. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have some debug printf stuff going on here. Um, let's do this. GitHub for ikiwiki. And the thing that I never see Schmons 3, so that's
Okay.
something to wonder about. And the error message we see before that would have happened is we failed OAuth call
The
access
access
token,
token. Mhm.
and we received a 403 forbidden error because something needs cookies that doesn't have cookies enabled. And I have a hypothesis about it that I'm
Mhm.
now having a meta hypothesis about whether I'm actually testing the hypothesis or not. But before we get into that, Ryan, you have experience implementing this protocol
Yeah.
on the client side. Where are cookies needed in it, if at
So
all?
yeah, so it's not. I would say that this is one of those things like this is it's the way it normally works, but I'm not sure it should work this way. So because this is all prompted, so you think about this in a couple pieces. You have your browser, you have your web server, and then you have GitHub. And all three of them are going to play a role in this. So when you're going to click on that GitHub button on your site, right, that's going to prompt a server request on your side to start OAuth, which will prompt your browser to move to GitHub, which will set a bunch of cookies. And at the end result of the authorization code getting set, it will also set that session with the authorization code in the browser so it can authenticate back to your server using that same JWT or bearer token. It's going to be set in a cookie. So the cookies are what's allowing GitHub to communicate with your browser and allowing your browser to communicate back in a way to your server. So that's where the cookie usage comes from.
Is it true, if I understood correctly, that the cookie is sort of the final artifact at the end of the back and forth that the browser ends up with that it then gives to GitHub as needed?
Yeah, I mean, you can, depending on the setup, but yes, you can sort of think of it as the end result is that the browser will have the authentication token inside of it and it will pass it back to the server, and then the server's job is to validate that token. Um,
Okay. So then in
so the
theory, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, but that's pretty much the way it always ends up. So you can intercept the token, but either way, the browser still has to communicate that to you. Otherwise, you don't know who they are.
Okay.
So it's always going to be
Yeah.
in a browser session on some level.
Mm-hmm. Cookie being an easy way to do that. So
Yep.
if I understand right, which is always a question.
I feel the same way, man. Like this is murky stuff.
If we understand right,
Yeah.
then the whole back and forth with the my client API implementation, the website, the back and forth with my website and GitHub does not involve cookies. It's at the end
Right.
when
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, your server that you have in GitHub is the way this was designed, which it doesn't have to work this way anymore, but the way it designs is you can't trust a browser, so they shove your server in the middle as a trusted authority in the matter, and so that's why it does that little bit of communication between server and GitHub, because that can be somewhat verified, whereas a browser can be completely whatever. So that's why those two have to talk, but it assumes the browser is in the mix. So
Okay, but
I think that's your missing piece.
so it's probably not the case then that my web server, which is acting as a client, an HTTP client to GitHub, it's probably not the case that my web server's HTTP client needs to have cookies enabled on it.
Um, Right. So this is where I think because you have your client is acting as basically like a headless client. So your how do I put it? A browser with cookies does need to be there for this flow to complete, but this script is acting like a headless client. So GitHub wants to set cookies somewhere in this
Yeah.
process, and it can't in a we would call this a device flow, and it can't do it. So it's going to fail because it can't complete its job. If a browser was in the middle of this getting some of this stuff, then it would try to set cookies somewhere and it would be okay. GitHub's
Okay.
complaining it can't set cookies, I think, not your script.
Okay, so then I think I was barking up a wrong tree. I think my hypothesis is probably false from before.
I- I'm not
That
putting money down either way, man.
uh, that what I needed to do was, let me show you. I thought what I needed to do, because there's no browser here, and we didn't get as far as getting the access token, let alone trying to set it on the browser that came here. So my hypothesis had been, and we think this is probably wrong, that whatever in the Perl object hierarchy is doing the HTTP requesting, which turns out to be something called an LWP user agent, um, which by default does not has a null nil undef cookie jar, which means cookies can't be put in it. So my hypothesis was if I give it an empty one that becomes a place to put cookies, by the time it does the request, if it needs a cookie could be put in there. That wasn't making a difference, and I think you're explaining it never would have made a difference.
Yeah, you would use that at the end to put the final bearer token into the cookie
But
for
not
the.
the not in the cookie jar on the server that's doing the request. In the
I don't think
cookie
so.
browser. Okay.
That's not anything that rings any bells to me.
Okay. So then
Um,
I'm gonna just comment that right out because it was pretty gross anyway, and it didn't help. And let's look at the place that we got stuck. So then probably, if I'm understanding you right again, trying to run this in the terminal is has gone terminal, and we should
yes.
get this running in a web context.
You would need you would need it if you wanted to do this in a terminal, then you would need to set it up as a device-based OAuth, not a web-based OAuth.
Okay, and ultimately
The
web-based is
web-based
what I want to
requires
do.
a browser. Yeah.
Yeah, so then let's pop out of here and look at, this is where we started down that path. So this is the beginning of an ikiwiki plugin that would implement the login with GitHub button for a site that wanted that. So right now, again, it has the same Perl
Right.
module to do the job, same secrets and ID, and just the beginning of the ikiwiki API. We have more that we have to do here, but auth is here, and I basically copied and pasted. So what I think we can do to exercise this is here. Yes. Yeah, so I got it all wired up where it's trying to use this plugin exclusively for authentication, which is why it went straight there.
Mhm.
And we are getting a 404 because I was trying something experimentally, and let's put it back. So according to the GitHub documentation for how to authenticate on the web application flow, this is the endpoint that you hit.
Right.
So we should be able to convince ourselves that this is the front part of that, and this is the back part of that.
Right.
I don't know what this is from. This is from the example, which was google.com. I'm going to try commenting that out.
Okay. That'd be the second half of your OAuth flow. It
This
might
is
be
for
the
later.
exact same. And yeah, because you get the first thing is you start the request, you get a code back, and then when it's complete, you send the code straight back to GitHub to get a token back. So
Okay,
there's a
so it should
code
look
request and a
like
token back.
this is what I
Yeah,
want
that's
for
the
that.
one. Yeah.
Okay, so then let's make that meaningful. I bet that helps.
And that's why they trust the server in this case, because it's been identified by host name and everything. It has the matching redirect. It gets a code. It has to send the code. All those things are harder for someone to intercept and mess with because it happens behind the scenes.
Makes sense. Okay. So let's give this another whirl. This is the API documentation for ikiwiki. We may be leaning on that pretty heavily soon.
Like, man, GitHub has changed.
What? Let's go back. Interesting.
Something just
It's
happened.
behaving differently now.
Check. Do you want to check to see if you have any? Well, you won't be able to see it here very easily. I was gonna say, like,
Did I get a
yeah,
cookie?
there might be a cookie, but I don't know if you'll be able to see it because the one I think we're looking for is somewhere else. But
Okay.
it's worth looking. I mean, no harm in seeing what got set. Um, you're already authenticated to GitHub, but not for this app. I'm trying to decide if you should have seen a authentication at all. I think you should have.
I wonder why it went this way. So it probably called this and just like fell off the bottom and,
It should
set
have,
something somewhere.
if it was, unless it was a configuration thing, then it should have gotten at least to the access code and then somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Let's see if I can find where the web server logs are. That would be handy, wouldn't it? Because we have some debug statements in here. So it should be possible to see in principle.
One of the reasons it's so terribly hard to get right, like you don't know what some part of it ever goes all or nothing.
Yeah. I could type this four letter. Okay. Is this where it would happen?
There was an errors.
Yeah, there is an errors. I don't think anything good ever goes in there, but
Oh,
let me see what happens here.
okay.
Yeah, this is my stuff. Okay. It's a lot of blah. Okay, let's use something I can move around with. So errors is just like the web
Wait,
server restarted.
so I saw GitHub
Uh,
stuff in there.
yeah, I definitely did too. I'm just showing errors is something else. CGI is actually the stuff that you got from doing your CGI. So let's bounce back to. It's a lot of stuff. Here. Okay. This looks this looks like that first endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are hitting the right kind of endpoint. GitHub.com/this with client ID this.
Yep.
Some kind of a scoping my website thing.
Yep.
In the module that I'm using, there's something that's supposed to have been defined that hasn't gotten defined. So maybe I'm not using that module quite right. Possible. But we got
Yeah.
yay, it worked.
Mm-hmm. And then it's sending you GitHub's login page.
Uh, because the user needs to type their username and password
The
in there.
browser needs to go to, yeah. So part of this process, right? You actually have, the browser will have to go to GitHub to authenticate.
Right.
And I was having a hard time remembering exactly how and when this happens, but this is when you're asking for the code, it's trying to bounce you to GitHub, and the result of that will be a code.
So we're
I
doing
think
relatively well with this code snippet.
we're getting to the first part. So you have that debug authorization response as a string on line 57. This is
Yeah.
what I think you're seeing.
Okay. But so if I did something like a redirect here.
So that's what it shows right on that commented line in 58.
Yeah, right. Okay. That's what's actually called for. Like now that we see that it's
Yep.
operating, a redirect is what's supposed to be done.
Yep.
All right. Let's look at the ikiwiki documentation. Redirect. OpenID does one. Yeah, I think OpenID is going to be handy to look at here for a second. So like here, reader. Yeah. Oh,
There it
good. There's
is.
an internal function. Good. That looks handy. What's check URL? What's Q? Q is going to be, I think, the CGI object that we were called with. Yeah, and this is validate Q. Okay. And then redirect goes to check URL, which is defined on 142. So this is further along. This has a claimed identity, but still, this is how to do a redirect.
Yeah, because you'll be doing another one at the end.
Yeah. So let's see if they do. Yep, there's one for auth. That's what we're doing.
Mhm.
Happy path and cancel. Cool. Okay. We're going to come back and look at that file again. So instead of debugging this, because I don't need to, could just call the ikiwiki redirect function. Let's make sure we have a queue. We do. I'm sure it's the same. One letter variable. And where do we want to go to is the access token path?
See that thing underneath where it says the auth authorize in that
Oh,
line 59?
just to that.
I
Yeah,
think
thank
so.
you.
Yeah.
I think you're right. So let's comment that. And then do
In my
that.
head, I'm thinking, what would I do in Vim to pull that off? It's not pretty. It's just
Yeah,
not
if
good.
you want, actually, if you want to drive, I wonder if we could do that at some point. But for now, this is working really well
Yeah,
for me. How about for you?
I'm good, man.
Okay.
I don't need to fumble around with your Vim configuration. I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed myself.
So then, just from my understanding, why were we able to get an access token without having done that redirect?
You got a
What was
code
exactly the code?
prior and you failed on the code.
Say again?
So so what was happening before is you were sending the request to get a code and then you were failing the next call. Right? That's the one that was bottoming out. I don't necessarily think you mean in the standalone example, you were getting a code? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't. Well,
You
what
were getting
we saw, yay, it worked in our web server logs. So
mhm.
this was able to get an access token, apparently.
it it didn't fail, right?
Oh, I guess we haven't seen what it looks like and if it's actually
Yeah.
usable. It didn't throw an exception. Doesn't mean
Right.
it's a working thing. Okay, okay.
Yeah. I mean this is one of those things where how do I put it? There's always going to be like it shouldn't work. I personally don't think it should work where you're going to be pre-authenticated in, even though you are actively in on GitHub yet, because you're not in through this app yet. So it can't know that
Mm.
until you go to GitHub, and then it could find out that you are the same person and kick you back. Um, so that's what I'm not sure about. Like I don't know because you are actively in GitHub if we're going to see a login page versus it's just going to work because you're authenticated and it's going to figure it out quickly. That's what I'm not sure about. I think you're going to have to
Gotcha.
authenticate, but we'll see.
It would make sense. So then, one more thing I want to check before we go again is when someone calls a ikiwiki redirect, is that just the end of that function now? Not automatically. So this is actually exiting the CGI process after that. Let's see about the other instances of it. This one does not. This one does not. It's a big stacked if else if. Hard to tell. Else OpenID failure error. What does error do? Aborts. Okay, so um, not every single case, but in many cases, we are exiting the process. I don't know if we
Interesting.
need to worry about that. It's just interesting. Um, so then maybe this happens in a different function. Is that how I should think about it?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Called at a different time. Let's just see what
It's
happens when we do this.
yeah.
So here we are. Hey, where are we? How did
One
this
more step.
happen? What a shocking development.
I'm signing off now.
Success rate extremely high. Yeah,
Yes.
this is cool.
Okay. Now,
Should I try this?
yeah, it's going to
Uh,
hit your server back.
Right, and my server's not gonna. This is actually the first thing that I just had no idea how to do and could only guess, which is what kind
This
of a
is
URL is it gonna hit me back with?
the one you said, the one you configured.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like, is it gonna tack on one value or a whole query string?
Um.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's copy that out where we can look at it. It's hitting me back like so. And what did I say? What did I register with?
It's right up above. He says maybe, and then you have the exact same thing above it in line 6 of your comment.
I can't remember if that's how I. Yeah, that must have
I
been
think
because
I think
otherwise,
that's
why
got to
is
be
that
it.
there? Why is that
Yep.
ampersand there if that's not what I did?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So then I have to provide all of the. Yeah, they're assuming you have a query string and they're tacking something on the end.
Yeah. So, well, no, I don't. I don't think they're assuming you already have a query string. I think they will just make a query string on whatever URL you give it. So,
But
uh,
they didn't put
no, you did that,
this. I
right?
put this.
I think GitHub is just looking at it, parsing a URL, and saying add another query.
Oh, okay. They see that this has a query string, and therefore what they must do
Yeah.
is that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd
well they're
say
they're right. They're right in this case. I just need to provide more of my own query string in
I
my
think
configuration.
typically, I mean, there are query parameters that go into this, but most commonly, it's just going to be a code query parameter.
So one thing for sure that I left out that ikiwiki always requires is a do parameter. So I'm gonna have to say do equals something and auth2. Oh, and auth2 is my own. I invented this
Yes.
because I want to be able to tell that I'm the plugin that should handle this call. That's what this is for. So I can put like, yeah, right, and then
Yeah.
and then they can tack their stuff on the end of that.
Yes. Now the
Okay.
problem is that you now have to redo your OAuth configuration in GitHub.
Mm-hmm. I kind of expected that I would need to because I did
Yeah.
not know what they would do. So
Yeah.
let's see if we can get to it from here or something next to it. Cool.
There you go.
Can I? No, just revoke.
Yeah. I was gonna say if they're doing it right, you can just revoke it.
Good. Okay. Then where's news here? It's gonna be called that. All right. This is the homepage URL. And the callback URL
That's the one you just created.
is going to be, and I got to figure out what to put for that do before we submit this because I know that that matters now. So what are the things that can be a value for do? API documentations are here. Do equals edit.
What would the one for OpenID be? Like
Good question. That's one.
post sign in.
That's the only one. Post sign in. And that's from which function? It's from validate. That's what we're doing. So I want to do like
There's
that again.
yeah, there's two of them though. Just so you know. I
I
mean,
only see.
No, for OpenID there might be just
You
the
see,
one,
there's
but
there's two
there's going to be
times
two
I'm
of
going to be
these.
called.
Yeah, you're going to get hit once with the code, and then you should be hit again. No, you're going to get hit with the code, then you're going to ask for a token, and that should be a straight one-to-one request, I think. So you might be good. You might be fine with just the one.
So post sign in. What is post sign in? Does that mean something API wise, or does it just mean something here? Or what? What is post sign in to this entire code base? Oof.
See, I'm not even mad that that's blurry. It should be.
What does post sign in mean? Let's look at ikiwiki plugin, like a very linear thing like HTTP auth. Post sign in. Oh, this looks like a good way to do it. Whatever that is. Where did we get this from? We defined it. Okay. But so what was post sign in? It doesn't say. It's just a magic word that they all seem like they agree on.
Yeah, seems like
All
that's the
right.
convention.
Then I also agree. We're doing post sign in. Yeah. All right. We'll try this. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong?
I'm already like my heart's beating faster already. Just
Oh, I need a new client secret. And
yeah.
once again, I'm going to say out loud, I don't mind if anybody on the stream sees it and copies it and tries to use it.
Well, it's just gonna be local, so it'll be all right.
Exactly. I'm just going to hide the screen for a moment. Probably doesn't matter, but let's get an authentication code in there. Okay. I have done the thing. Let's come back. I've done the thing. Okay. We have a client secret that I gotta grab and place here.
I have a question for you when you have a stopping point.
Oh, and I have a different client ID too, don't I?
Yes.
Revoke is powerful stuff. Okay. I think I got it. Yes. Questions?
Okay. So this is a sidebar, so we can just be like, not right now. But we know we shouldn't have this stuff in our code, and we know we also shouldn't have it in our repositories, uh, because this is privileged information, so it shouldn't just be leaky like that. But the tooling required to not make it this way, I find to be pretty dang hard as a solo person. It's a lot of work to try to pull these things out of your code base and make them configuration options, some sort of scripted environment thing that happens when you're just by yourself. That's a lot. So I think it'd be interesting to hear what you think a reasonable approach for that is. I mean, I'm not saying you should like if you're like I don't care,
No, I
but
have I have a thought in mind
yeah,
because obviously this ain't it, and I want to
yeah,
have at least like what's my next best idea when I really deploy this or really try to upstream this actually.
yeah.
And what I would say for that is this is going to rely on ikiwiki having a config file. And
That isn't checked in, but how is it managed?
right, the ikiwiki config file is not going. It's certainly not going to be part of the source code to ikiwiki.
Okay.
And typically, like the way I manage mine is that I have for each site that's an ikiwiki site, I have a repo with all the source files in it because it's a static site generator. Um, and it has a main branch, which is the site, and it has like a setup branch, which is the config file only. And I never wind up so far pushing that anywhere. Um, this might change the equation, but there's no reason it has to be tracked in Git at all.
Right.
It's just a config file for a site. So it depends. I would say it depends on the level of rigor with which you're managing your ikiwiki instances. And if it's as far as it would be cool to keep secrets out of your config files, then it can take stuff from the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I get
Yeah.
that. I guess the where I always run around, it's like, okay, so basically I can choose to not put it in GitHub, which I would keep private anyway, let's say. I mean, it's a public repo, a slightly different game, but private one, okay. Uh, but then if I went through the work to strip it out of the code base just so it's not committed publicly, then I have the risk of losing it in the event of a hard drive failure, and that to me seems somehow worse. Uh, and I keep puzzling, like, what's the right amount of paranoia and instrumentation for things like that? One of the things I want to
So,
look into, because I saw one password, is like, can I take advantage of one password as a secure storage mechanism to
huh.
store the sensitive information and then have a script that will pull it back out and still ask me for my password to do it because it should, and use that as my backup and storage of secure information. It doesn't scale to
It
more than me mostly, but I don't know.
There definitely is a command line one password that I have automated in that way.
Yeah.
Uh, on a server, I don't know how it would get my fingerprint locally, something like that. But
Well, I mean, yeah, it'd be part of the deployment process that it would strip it in, but yeah,
yeah, on the
that's where
way
it all
there,
gets tricky. Yeah.
yes.
So anyway,
Um,
that was a
no,
sidebar.
it's
Sorry.
very important to think about. So like, I will when we get this working, I'm never gonna commit this
That. Yeah.
anywhere, even though these aren't real client IDs and secrets. I think one answer to your question about how like what covers your bases the most for the least trouble is, given how easy it is to register another app with GitHub. It's like if I ever lost the credentials, I could generate new ones and within a minute be back online.
Yes,
I
you
just
could.
need to know where to
And
put them.
people's sessions would, yeah, people's sessions would no longer be valid, but that's not going to be a big deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it depends. It depends on the trade-offs that you're aware of, which I wouldn't have been aware of that one. But it seems pretty recoverable if I had lost these. And anyway, it's
Yeah.
going to be a per site thing. It's not going to be something in this
Yeah.
plugin. The plugin is going to say you need to, and this is something we could do when we get this working. ikiwiki has an API for what are the configurables for this plugin,
Ah,
and
yeah.
if any of them have defaults, what are the defaults? And
There we go.
then we're gonna want to define these there. For now, I'm just putting them right in,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna come back. No, we're gonna come back further. Go again. Yep, that's my totally new website. I am already logged into GitHub,
Yeah.
and then this is where my plugin is supposed to notice and doesn't. I think is what's happening.
It'd be good to have the network tab over and see what it's trying to get to. Okay. Vector.
uh,
Oh. See, okay. Yeah, yeah. All right. I think I got what just happened.
okay.
So you're in an infinite loop because your hook for the OAuth 2, it needs to find the, like, you start it with one and then you need to catch the code in a different one. And you have one method that does both, so it's restarting the process before it catches the code.
Or I might not
Make
even
sense?
have. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's look at what OpenID does. Which hooks does it register, and which hooks do we?
So
Get
you have like
setup
a
is the
you
thing.
need yeah, so you
Yeah.
have that basic setup in yours, but they call the exact same things, I think, right? Or no?
So I
Yeah,
don't have any of these, but I don't think that's
you don't
directly
need any of
related.
that. Yeah.
That's for
So
later, and I will want, but not for right now.
your get
And
setup
then
method needs to be the first half of your OAuth stuff that you've been doing.
let's see. There was a validate OpenID auth. Who calls this? Oh, maybe I do need to do all that crap.
No, no, no. We're good. I think I know what we need to do. I think I got it.
Okay, all right.
Let's head to
Dígame.
your plugin and see your get setup method. That, as far as I'm, wait. So your get setup method. No, I might be wrong. I was saying this should be like your auth method is doing all of OAuth, but it needs to be broken into the first half, which you've done, and the second half for the redirect.
I
Um,
think you're right. I think
and
you're
so
right.
I kind of assume that your get setup would be the first half, and the code retrieval would be this auth.
So get set up is that thing that we're gonna populate later with the configurables and defaults.
Okay.
Let me look at the API documentation here for a minute, because maybe this is more thoroughly described. Authentication method. When a user needs to be authenticated, like it does when I click edit, each registered auth hook is called in turn, passed a CGI object and a session object. I think we can simplify this a little bit for now. I have an idea. I'm going to need to reauthorize my application. But first, my idea is... Never mind.
So that just hit your auth method.
Yeah, I thought it was going to give me that screen with all the different available auth methods, and I was going to try to turn all of them off except for ours for now.
Oh.
But somehow we're skipping it. Okay, so back to the API documentation.
So
Each registered auth hook is called in turn. You have an idea?
well, we're missing another hook. I think that's
I'm
what's
looking to
happening.
see if this is telling me the right way to do that.
Yeah.
So this is one auth hook. It's passed a CJ object and a session object. If the hook is able to authenticate, which we haven't done yet, we're getting there, but we're not done yet. Then we're supposed to set this. Should we look at where OpenID sets it?
This would be at the end after you get the code and you ask for their profile. The token and the profiles when you would do that.
Yes.
So we're not there yet.
Okay.
So you have get setup, which is establishing the plugin. You need a hook to start the OAuth process, which is what your auth method is doing.
Yeah.
Then I think your current auth needs to be the handle the redirect and get the code. If what I'm picking up is correct.
Let's look at the OpenID auth maybe to see how they do it. So you got your CGI object, your session object. And then I guess we're switching on one of the CGI parameters.
Yeah.
If it's OpenID mode, then we're doing this stuff. Otherwise, good Lord. Otherwise, if it's OpenID identifier, then we validate the end. Did I miss any other calls to validate? OpenID auth calls it, and
So that if you,
the end of auth calls it.
so I think they're just having a really big loaded method to handle all of it. It seems.
Yeah, it's okay with me if we can get that working and then figure out if
Yes,
we like it.
you just need to check to see if that code parameter is there. And if it's not, you start the OAuth process. If it is, try to get the
yes, right. The code equals. And then also, wait, where's my, I have to reauthorize this, right? So let's go back to here.
What are you doing?
It said I need to reauthorize my application.
No, you needed. It was asking you. Yeah, it was asking you to log in again because you've never actually logged in. Like this process has not happened. You keep it because we keep restarting it, so it's never actually finishing the stuff.
Oh, so it's going to do this again. Okay.
Yeah,
Then
that's gonna
the thing I need
come
to,
right
I need
back
to look
to
for
it.
two things. I need to look for OAuth 2 is yeah, which means it's not the first step. It's the.
I wouldn't look for
and
that.
then
I would just look for the code parameter.
okay, let's do that.
Because unless I don't know how ikiwiki works, which is extremely likely. Like you wouldn't be here at all if you didn't have at least the OAuth query parameter. But its value, I mean, you could check both, but it doesn't really mean anything. But the OAuth 2, you could say check it for yeah, but there will be for sure a code query parameter that will have a value, and that tells us the first leg is complete, and now it's time to get a token based on the code. And I think this if needs to be after you set up your auth object because you'll need it to get the token.
Well, if this is getting called in both cases, then if else should do it, right?
You
I
still
guess.
need that auth object no matter what.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just might not do anything with it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Else. And then none of these
Yeah,
things are actually happening yet.
no, that's it. That is what's going to happen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Hey,
here we go. Yeah. So that stuff that you just commented out, the auth get access token from the info code, that's what goes
yeah.
into your if block.
Which if block? This one?
One, yeah,
Oh,
that's it.
this is gonna get gradually clearer and clearer to me.
Yeah. So we're saying we've got the authorization code, and now we're going to call the get token for the code. And then you have your access token, at which point your OAuth flow is actually completed, and you can go back to the part in your API that you need and set the session token, set your session with a token, as well as pull profile information. You can do all of that after that last step.
Let's see. We got a code. Access token is
So you'll need
there.
to. Well, code isn't. Well, maybe it is. I don't know what info is in this case, but yeah. Online 58.
Oh yeah, maybe it's just this, right?
You still need the auth get access token method to be called.
Oh, but passing it
Yeah.
the thing that is the code.
Yep. Sweet. And then the lines you have on 59 down they look like just sort of like,
Sample.
can I use it and see what happens?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
I also want to possibly check for this. And then we'll do something application specific to define the state. But let's just try this.
Right. My fingers are crossed that this is going to work.
This is very exciting. I would not be anywhere close to this without you on the session. Let's see what we get.
All right. Here we go. I don't like how long it's taken.
Uh-uh.
Can we see the? Can we check the browser console and see where it's redirecting to? Just check all that real quick. The network. Cool. And then might need to go ahead and restart it. All right. And we should see a redirect somewhere in here. Oh, wait. No. Okay. Yeah. We might be fine. We might actually be fine.
Okay.
We need to check the logs. There are two things I have in my head about this. We'll see. We don't have any log, and nothing is being logged actually in your script, is it? We don't. There wouldn't be anything here anyways.
Should I? Should we add something?
Yeah, let's see if we get a token back.
Guess we could just do it here. Yeah.
Yep. And then I would say at the very bottom here, issue a redirect. After your yay, it worked. Which we didn't see, did we?
Uh, I may have. It might be above all that decoded content.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, and we're gonna redirect for initial auth, and then you wanted to put a redirect here.
Yes. And whatever place you want to go within your own ikiwiki.
Yeah, what's the trick for that? I don't know. Let's just say I'll hard code it for now.
One of those extra parameters that you can pass through to GitHub is where you want to go back when you're done.
Yeah, and ikiwiki makes that available somewhere. I'll look that up next. But for now,
Yeah.
if we end up here, that's good.
So that way, when you're done and you get the token, you know exactly where you're supposed to redirect yourself to
Just
based on their
finish
state
the
of
job.
time.
Yeah. All right. So then, why don't I also maybe leave this part out? All this decoded content.
Yeah, because that's you just
It's
pulling
really
a
confusing
page,
out, but
just pulling
yeah,
a web page down, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Whereas what we really want to do is do a curl request on GitHub's API, right? That'll be
Okay.
the
So now we're tailing the
files.
logs,
Okay.
and we should do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have some kind of a Perl mistake here that I'll figure out, but it took us to here.
Yep. So
So if I
you've OAuth, man.
so if I look at my cookies somewhere, I should be able to
You haven't
see.
set one in here.
Oh, right. Okay. That's my next job is I have to set something. Line 59.
Your how you're accessing your parameter.
I'm assuming that it's a scalar. Guess I could do that. Perl CGI fetching value single name parameter. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Scalar. The Perl remains strong within me. So if we do that again, we should not get the warning.
Now this one, yep.
Uh-huh.
Won't even see
Okay.
it. Okay.
I saw my redirect for initial auth twice. Is
That
that
is strange.
surprising?
I think so.
What if we double up this? I don't think I needed that one. Come on. Okay, that probably helped though, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean you've gotten through the OAuth flow.
So now I have to make sure I save the state in my browser that I have gotten
Yes.
back. Let's look at session CGI.
Mhm.
No, this is something you can do if you have a session. I want to save it.
Use the
Let's look back
session.
at OpenID.
Yep. There's I see a session. Oh, it's just a
Yeah.
param. Never mind. Or
Yeah,
something.
ikiwiki has its own session, and then I think this is the one where we would stick something in a name. No, no. Auth, get obj. What's that about? This sounds possibly right.
Yeah.
So I want to set a param on my session object, maybe.
Looks like it's worth a shot.
If there's no secret, then put one. Let me look at a simpler plugin. Plain old HTTP auth also will do something. What does can edit do? Hmm.
So it's got it there, but it's putting the name in it.
Where was it putting the name in? Here.
So right there's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we were supposed to do.
Yeah.
So that tells ikiwiki
Who you are.
that we're here. But it doesn't necessarily mean next time we call GitHub that ikiwiki remembers anything.
Right, because then the token's gone and you don't
So
know who they are.
we need to do this at least.
Yeah, I would
And I
start with putting the token in, and then because you to get the name, you're gonna have to do a profile call to GitHub.
yeah. Yeah. So if we're here,
Mhm.
then let's just say this.
Yeah. And go ahead and put the token in
And
as
put the
well,
access
in a
token.
different
All
one.
right.
I mean, you can do both. Like that's fine. I would say go ahead and do the name one, and then put another parameter in for.
Okay.
Or yeah.
Let's see if it's been enough minutes yet.
Yeah, it's funny they
Whoa
rebooted
there.
you so fast. But if it was doubling up on code calls, maybe that was it. But
Hmm.
still seems pretty stingy.
Okay, so while we're stuck, let's write down what we have to do next here. Uh, tell ikiwiki we're authenticated by setting name. That's happening here, hopefully. Help us see our token while we develop. And then somehow have ikiwiki hang on to the access token for future GitHub API calls, such as actual name, such as this is a thing I'm going to need, possibly in a separate plugin. I'm not sure. Uh, but so log in with GitHub for a wide open wiki. So you have a GitHub login, cool. But what I want is if you're a member of the NotQmail project on GitHub, then you're in,
Ah,
such
yeah.
as project membership.
So in that case, you might need to change your permission request to GitHub.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you know,
But so if we manage to, this is probably sufficient because ikiwiki's API is pretty clear about it. You put
right.
something in the name and then you're logged in with that. If you do an edit, it'll look like that. Um, yeah, we have to understand probably more what the OpenID plugin is doing. Maybe not. Maybe this doesn't relate actually, because with OpenID, once you're done, there's nothing further.
Well, I mean, yes and no. So this gets into, I would say, a little bit of a brain melting area if auth wasn't enough. But just because you have a token doesn't mean it's a real token or a valid token or any of those things. Um, and so there is this other piece of it, which is even if someone says they have a token, there's another part where ikiwiki in your server says, "But do you?" Um, and so that's something that hopefully you would see OpenID is doing as well. That they're checking on your authenticated status and authorization status periodically, which is what you would do with this token as well. You'll say basically check the token's validity periodically, make sure it's a real token for the real person you think it is.
So there was something called validate in the OpenID plugin.
Yeah.
Is is that what it's about? It gets called in a few places too. It gets called from the tail end of, I think this is auth.
Right.
Yeah. In the OpenID identifier case.
Hmm.
I don't know what this means. So it's that's one case. It gets called from OpenID auth. I think that was it. And then where does OpenID auth get called from? It is a callback from register login plugin. So when we have that ikiwiki screen with the different ways you can log in,
Hmm.
that's one of the ways that gets called. That's the only way that gets called.
So what does validate do?
I don't think it's a regular API call. I think it's just a local method.
Yeah.
It gets a CGI object and a session object, like everything here. Open your ID URL. So like a proposed identifier, probably is what
Right.
that means. Yeah, claimed identity. And then an error handler, which is just a Perl code reference, an anonymous function, basically.
Right.
Then you do get obj with the CGI and the session object. Do not know what CSR means. Is that the whole? Can we see all this on one screen? Not quite. What's get obj doing? Making a new net OpenID consumer with those informations. Okay, so that's not that interesting.
That's
So this is a
super
net
intuitive.
OpenID consumer. So I might call that consumer. Okay, for now.
All right.
Claimed identity. There isn't one, then you got to call an error handler. Otherwise,
And there's just an error.
just a plain old error. There is a claimed identity.
Yeah.
Does it have a method called setExtensionArgs on it? If so,
Yeah.
I guess we want those.
That looks like profile.
Okay, and then otherwise we don't set those. We're just going to continue to try to validate the identity.
Mhm.
CGI URL is. Ooh, what does that look like? Okay, so you could have a separate ikiwiki CGI just for the OpenID stuff, but we wouldn't. Um, Probably don't need that for our plugin either.
See, this is oh man. See that last bit at the bottom?
This bit?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it seems like this is validating a claim and setting things up less than validating it. Like it seems like it does. It's only validating in the sense that something should be set, not that anything is actually working or correct.
And that would make sense for ikiwiki because the default is that sites are wide open. And the main point of logging in is so that your changes can be attributed.
Right.
And then on top of that, it's possible to like allow list or block list,
Yeah.
but the default case is not that. So it makes
Yeah.
sense if it wouldn't try too hard to validate an OpenID.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I don't. I mean, so far maybe somewhere else is buried in there, but because this is just one of those weird parts about it, which is, you know, nothing prevents you from going into your cookies right now and creating an
Yeah.
OpenID token, and then poof, you're authenticated to ikiwiki. You know, that's just setting
So
some
maybe
session.
that can't be right. Let's look at what auth does with a wider screen. This is auth for OpenID. CGI object session object. If OpenID mode is set, then we're making a consumer, OpenID consumer. And if it has a user setup URL, then we're going to go there. I don't know what that is. If the user said cancel, then we're going to go back to the homepage or something. Um, Otherwise, if I already have a verified identity on the object, then that's our name. We're setting our name. And a bunch of other extension fields if we have them. Whoopity 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 whoop. Otherwise, OpenID failure. So when did it become a verified identity?
Well, it seems like it's a set and forget. Like, um, that's what it looks like to me. That
Yeah.
as soon as you log in, they're going to put that information. Just assume you're good to go from then on. And maybe there's something in the guts of how OpenID does things and how this plugin does things that this is handled by itself. But I'd be suspicious of that
Yeah.
because you're not setting any nowhere in here has OpenID set any information about how do I put it, the users, like that they how long they're authenticated for, or like none of that's transparent here in any way. It's just who, like, what's your name. So either this OpenID implementation doesn't care about
Mm-hmm.
that, or the underlying plugin is trying to just say, I'll handle this anyway. That when you authenticate to me, and I know this is my code to say you're authenticated, that lets me ask for this information about you, whatever. It knows when it expires. It knows those things, and it will scream at you if it can't. But a lot of plugins aren't that smart.
Yeah. So then,
And this is a future problem, right? It's just one of those things like how far down that rabbit hole do you want to go?
so one thing that kind of underpins a lot of ikiwiki's design decisions, including sort of the default openness, is that most people are going to run it backed by a revision control system. And so if anything happens that you realize you didn't want to have happen, you have recourse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Fair enough.
and I still would like to make sure that I understand the security implications of my choices, and not just assume that Git is going to save me.
Right.
But
Because at the end of the day, the vector for an attack here is someone just pulls up their developer stuff, puts in anything for those cookie values, and they're
right.
in, and that's all there is to it.
I wonder if that actually works in ikiwiki, or if ikiwiki has its own thing it's doing about that.
Well, what would be interesting to do is try to set the name field and see what it does.
Yeah.
Because if you're right that it's really keying off that name field and you're able to set it through the browser, then maybe it's gonna be like, yeah, you know what, you're cool, do whatever.
So we still have the session object from before.
Mm-hmm.
So just set name here.
Well, this is if we look at let's look at the other storages that are there. This is where everything is like, what is ikiwiki? How does it actually do this stuff? Because if it's just
Mm-hmm.
plain old, key value pairs like a typical cookie, then yeah, you could manipulate it. If it's doing something smarter, then it's harder to do it. So what's in local storage? And cookies just has that one cookie session. But so all right. So the good thing here is that session wiki is not plain text.
So there might be, I have a hypothesis about this.
Mm-hmm.
Copy that and pop over into here. Blech.
Yeah.
How to query Berkeley DB. I don't remember how to do this. Maybe with Perl.
Yeah. So I think I know where you're going with it, and I think you're
I
right.
want to see if that's in there, and what is. I think this is where the stuff is locally managed. I feel like there's an easier way to do this. Perl tie. Hash to Berkeley DB. This looks like something. Oh, and you know what else? Um, I feel like I've seen a how-to somewhere in here.
Hooray.
What? Why?
Oh, nothing. I'm kidding.
No, I'm just
Um,
confused why this isn't connecting.
yeah. So I do think the good news in this though is, right, that's a session identifier, not a session object.
Yeah,
So I think you're good,
it's
right?
probably
Someone won't be able to
probably
manipulate.
what I wanted to know is
Yeah.
true.
Because
I can't
so
just
for
go to.
example, we don't see any reference to your OAuth token. We don't see reference to name. We don't see any of these things that you have set. Doesn't exist visibly.
Yeah.
So I think it is
You know
being
what makes
stored
sense
in.
about this also is that whatever the solution to the problem is for ikiwiki would not be specific to OpenID because there's multiple ways to log into ikiwiki.
Yes.
So it makes sense
Um,
that this would be
yeah. So it's
on its
still
own.
interesting. There's no reassert that your claim remains valid with OpenID, but at least it's not visible for manipulation or replay.
Yeah, you can't just make it up to begin with or midway through.
So that's good at least.
Yeah, that does feel better to know. I'm guessing that we're still not allowed to do this, in which case I feel like that's probably a good stopping point for today,
Do you? Um,
unless you have ideas.
no, I'm just wondering. Like, you've got to be hitting something a lot more than what I think we are. Like, I can't believe that they would.
Well,
The
maybe they're
equivalent
still
of you.
counting from like 45 minutes ago when we hit them a
Yeah, but
lot.
I mean, like, did we though? Like, what, 20 times
Uh,
total? Like, it seems weird.
yeah. So things to do. We made a whole lot of progress today, which is not the expectation that I had uh, before
It's
you
just so
joined me.
off.
Then you joined me. I thought I was going to keep hitting my head against the wall with this cookie problem, and then you just explained that my mental model was not correct, and don't bother with that. And that was very helpful. And for other
And
things that you helped with too.
and if we were to look at how much code we actually wrote, it's like 5 lines.
Not a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the point we're at now, I know which shape, like when I eventually have to document this for upstreaming. Um, I know the shape of the URL that I have to tell the admin to provide when they register with GitHub, because now I know what GitHub is tacking onto the end. Um, Definitely
There's
can authenticate to GitHub.
Yes, you can. The one
Yeah,
thing I would mention that you should look into as well is
yeah.
um, when you make your authentication request, there is an optional somewhere in here. There's going to be an optional redirect call that you give to GitHub that GitHub will give back to you for you to redirect again.
So like, what was the user trying to do when we
If
started
you had them
authenticating?
logged in. Yes,
Send them back there. Yeah,
and
that's
that
going to
it's one of the.
be this one, I think. I
Okay.
think. Let's check it.
Um,
That's going to be that Perl module.
so somewhere that exists, and I would say
Protected.
conceptually you should use that as part of this. I mean, in your case, you're not going to ever try to invalidate a token, so you won't wind up in this odd. I was doing something I had to re-authenticate flow, which is what it's really for, but it's one of the things that is part of like the OAuth standard that you could leverage if you wanted to.
That's one. Yes, yes, yes. Same thing with scope.
And it may be
This
that
one.
ikiwiki has something for this for you already, because if you try to edit a page when you're not logged in, you know, bounce you to the authentication page with a knowledge of where you were wanting to go back to is a pretty common pattern.
Yes. For scope. Another thing I can think of is um, borrow the uh, UI stuff from OpenID. So before I had a session, actually, I wonder if I can get rid of the session. No, I can't. Not like that. I was going to try to log out from there the way that I normally would.
You could delete it.
Uh,
Just delete your cookie.
yeah, that's true. Yep. So normally when you go to edit or preferences and you have not authenticated yet, you get the list of options of how you could authenticate that are
Mhm.
configured for the current site. It can be like I have sites that turn all of them off except for HTTP auth, and then I
Right.
have sites that do different things. But what should be happening is not that we go straight to GitHub. We should be
Right.
seeing a
Go to the login
screen
page.
where it's like OpenID, local password, blah, 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 and we click GitHub. And
Mhm.
so for that, I have to borrow from OpenID. So we appear as a choice.
And that means ikiwiki is managing that sort of. I tried to do thinking something. I'm not logged in. I am logged in. Now I can do a thing.
Yeah,
Um,
ikiwiki has its own opinion about that. That's right.
yeah, so as long as you let it keep its opinion at the very end, then it should all be just fine.
Hmm. Okay. I feel really good about how this went. This was way more productive than I was mentally expecting. Uh, Probably because mentally I wasn't expecting to be joined. And I'm really glad that you did because you know a lot about this stuff.
Glad I was able to
Extremely
join.
helpful. Yeah. Thank you for making the time. And thanks for watching the stream. And we'll keep making progress. See you next time.
Bye.